right, so if you could please give me your name and spell it out for me, please.
Okay, my name is John A. Mullikin. That's John A. Mullikin.
And while I'm asking a question, within your answer, could you repeat the question because viewers won't know? So, for example, if I say, "What is your name?" you would say, "My name is," and then so forth.
Okay.
Does that sound good? All right. Can you please tell me how long have you lived in Edmonston and what brought you here?
Okay, how long have I lived in Edmonston and what brought me here? Well, I was born in this area in Edmonston, actually in the Tacoma Park, but this has been my home since I was born. So I guess the stork brought me here.
Hmm. And can you tell me a little bit about the history of your home and your family in Edmonston?
Well, sure. It's an interesting story about my family and my home here in Edmonston. I was born in 1948, and my early recollection of the home would probably date probably around the mid-1950s. I was about 6 or 7 years old. And the big event that I remember at that time that took place here in Edmonston was the development of the levee system that is behind me. And at that time, the location of the house, where it is today, was up where the levees are, about 300 or 400 yards behind me. I say that it was an interesting event because at the time, what they did to move a house was to put it on logs and roll it from where it was over to its current location and foundation. That was a pretty big, had a pretty big impact on me as a child. It was quite an event. And the house now sits where it was moved in the mid-50s when a lot of development was underway here in Edmonston. So that pretty much sums up the early history of the house and my family. From then, I'll give a quick history on until today. My mother and her 6 brothers and sisters lived in this house originally. My mother was born in the house at its original location in 1914. The brothers and sisters all grew up here. Many moved away as they got married. But generally speaking, there were occupants in the house. That over time diminished to now it's myself and my daughter Kate lives here as well. So it has been a family home since the beginning.
If you don't mind silencing your phone real quick. Thank you.
It's usually my daughter.
So what kind of changes or renovations have been made to the home over the years, other than it being moved, of course?
Right. Well, once the house was moved, what was done to it over the years primarily was maintenance and cosmetic and some improvement inside relative to a new kitchen, for example, and redoing some of the rooms. Other than that, I believe when the house was moved, there was an addition put on, like the kitchen, and perhaps the porches were built at that time. That I'm a little hazy on, but other improvements just as needed, other than keeping it looking nice and functional.
In what ways has Edmonston changed over the years, and how has it affected you and your family?
Well, how has Edmonston changed, and how has it affected my family? Well, the biggest change, I guess, that I can recall is the general makeup of the community. Uh, when I was growing up and when I lived here back, in the 60s, 70s, it was primarily a working class community, primarily white, and it has since, like many communities around the country, has become more diverse over the years, and working class type of individuals, I believe, still populate much of the town. Uh, how has it affected me? I just went along my life. After the military, I got married and moved to Massachusetts, lived there for a number of years, had a family of my own. And when my mother passed back in '02, that's when I came back and lived here since then, 2002.
Alright. And what makes this town different from neighboring towns?
Well, what makes this town different? I don't know that there is a big difference between the what are now called the port towns. Other than there is the spreading, if you will, and blending, if you will, of each town. They're not so much separate towns that function separately. There's been this unification of assisting one another that has pretty much changed, I guess, the environment around here.
Do you have any special memories of past town events?
No, past town events, memories, primarily they were similar to what we see today. Parades now and again, usually over popular holidays or celebrations. I have not participated other than to view the parade or cheer the Easter Bunny or Santa Claus as they would go by. Involvement in the town has been just to try to keep my place looking nice and coordinate with the town and any concerns that I might have over the years, but they've always been responsive.
Can you describe Evanston in one word and why?
Edmonston in one word, and why? I would say, to me, the one word that describes Edmonston is home. Why? Well, I grew up here, but there has always been a warmth associated in my mind with my home and the town of Edmonston. That's pretty much what I guess I have to say. It's a warmth of feeling home.
What kind of town would you like Evanston to continue to be or become within the next 100 years?
What kind of town would I like Edmonston to become over the next century? The town, I think, has certainly come a long way from its inception, and I'm sure that it will continue to evolve as the society changes. Having only, been around 100 years here, there is a lot, I guess, that will change as technology changes and as societal pressures change. Edmonston has always been somewhat of a leader in participating in current events and getting things done.
And you were in the military, correct?
I was in the military. I was in the U.S. Army from 1960. 1948 through 1970, and did one tour in Vietnam.
Are there any final comments that you would like to share before we close out the interview?
Well, what would I like to share is I do want to mention my mother's side of the family. They were the Hisers, Hiser. And as I said, many of my mother's brothers, or all of their brothers and sisters, lived in this house and then went upon their separate ways. And they were, like I said, a middle-class environment, and had the various brothers and sisters were librarian. My mother was a librarian. Aunts were executive secretaries, worked for the telephone company. Builders were my uncles. There was some political activization with one of my uncles. And my father worked for the WSSC, the water company, and I had an uncle who was a carpenter. So this was in a nutshell, I think, in this house, what the rest of the community pretty much looked like at that time, and then of course is evolving as we go along.
Thank you so much.
Is that all right?
Yes, it was great.
Okay.